truth is an important part of the study of philosophy, the study of truth, or eletheology, or elethology. Not quite sure how to pronounce that. The study of truth. But just as the history of philosophy, Western philosophy, has a history, so too any part of philosophy, including the study of truth, will also have a history. And here I want to talk with you a little bit about truth in medieval Christian philosophy. I have a couple separate videos on truth in ancient literature, in Greek literature, and in the Hebrew Bible, literature of the Hebrew Bible, or the Old Testament. And I also have a video on philosophy of truth in Socrates, Aristotle, and Plato in Greek pagan philosophy. But here, I want to talk a little bit about truth in medieval Christian philosophy. So, Greece waned and Rome waxed, and Jesus was born in Bethlehem. And philosophical reflection on truth changed forever with the advent of Jesus. Jesus is not often considered a philosopher, but his teachings on truth had a profound impact on the history of Western philosophy. This includes philosophical reflection on truth. In the Gospel of John, the concept of truth and its connection with Jesus is drawn out right from the first chapter. Writing in a very philosophical, almost Platonic manner, St. John the Apostle says, quote, "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only who came from the Father, full of grace and aletheia and truth." That's John 1:14. John is presenting the concept of truth in a radically different way than it's been conceived by previous philosophers in antiquity. It's very different notion. Truth is still a matter of the correspondence of reality to belief, and something of great value for moral living, as we've seen in Greek philosophy and in pre-Grecian philosophical. What am I trying to say? In Greek literature prior to the Socrates, ancient Greek literature, is very valuable in its correspondence of truth to reality. But here, truth is presented in personal form. Truth, literally and unhiding or revealing, is present in the person of Jesus. In some ways, the very idea of truth is a matching of a truth bearer and a truth maker, idea, belief, thought, with the world, reality, or being, is present in the very nature of Jesus. The New Testament authors, including John, connected all of reality to Jesus as the one in whom all things have their being. On this view, the truth maker side of the correspondence relation is dependent on him. On the other side, the truth bearer is also dependent upon him, right? So if truth is a matter of truth maker to truth bearer to truth maker, of mind to reality, right? That correspondence or adequatio relation, as the medievals will later put it, then Jesus himself seems to be presented here by John as the person in whom both the relation and the relata consist. Okay, so let me keep talking about this. Right? So, on the truth maker side of the correspondence relation, is dependent on him. Right? So that's because in the New Testament, the authors, including John, see all of reality as being dependent on Jesus. So that's the truth maker. What makes something true? Reality itself is dependent upon Jesus. But on the other side, on the truth bearer side, that's also dependent on Jesus. Jesus is the Word. He is the Logos of God. Jesus, as truth, is the Word become flesh, the Son of the Father who perfectly corresponds to the way the Father is in bodily form. Okay, so this is like profound. I mean, this is the kind of thing that you ought to spend your life thinking about, like daily. So this is also evident in John 14:6 when Jesus says, "I am the way, the truth, and the life." Jesus is certainly saying that he is the truth about the Father and the way to him and eternal life in him. But philosophers should also inquire whether or not Jesus is saying something profound about his nature and the nature of truth itself. So it's in light of this Christian revelation which provides the context of reflection on truth during what is called the medieval period, During this period, truth as correspondence was held and elaborated by many philosophers, including St. Augustine, who maintained a kind of view of truth as correspondence. For example, he says, similitude is the mother of truth. And he says in another place that truth is that by which what is shown. And again, that indicates a relation between what exists in facts or things as being shown, propositions. This can also be understood as a correspondence view of truth. Okay, so from Jesus, the New Testament writers, where Jesus is understood as the truth, Christian philosophers will take that idea and work out a philosophical account of truth resting on Christian revelation, as well as rational reflection that we've seen in the likes of Plato and Aristotle. All right, moving ahead about 700 years or so into the early Middle Ages. I don't know, what you call it, Middle Ages? Anselm, for example, in the 11th and early 12th century, says this. He also had a version of truth as correspondence. He wrote this: "A proposition is usually said to be correct and true when it signifies in accordance with that correctness and truth by which it affirms a thing to exist, which does in fact exist." This is similar to Aristotle's generalization above. Another example, also a little bit later than Anselm, 12th and early 13th century, Robert Grosseteste, in his work De Veritate, continued the tradition of truth as correspondence in his statement that the truth of word or opinion is the adequation of the word or opinion and things. Copleston also comments on this in his discussion of Grosseteste. But it's really with Aquinas in the latter half of the 13th century, 1200s, for which we have the most elaborate account. Indeed, a complete theory of truth that spells out in some detail how truth is the adequation of thing and intellect. Aquinas expands Aristotle's account of truth by integrating Aristotle's metaphysical accounts of cognition and the nature of the soul with Aristotle's epistemology. We're able to say something that it is because the soul takes it in some way the objects set before it. This is back to Aristotle's idea that the soul can become all things. So Aquinas uses Aristotelian metaphysics to expand Aristotle's notion of truth into a form of the correspondence theory of truth, in which truth is the adequation of thing and intellect. Later thinkers in the Silver Age of scholastic philosophy, such as Suarez, he dies in the early 17th century, 1617, he also argued, Suarez did, that truth is conformity between understanding and things. Now, there is a noteworthy modification of the truth as correspondence, is Aquinas' revision of one of Augustine's views of truth. So Augustine held that the true is that which is. This is in Soliloquium Libri Duo. And Aquinas revises this to the true is that which is. It is, that is, truth is, had when the existence of what is affirmed. So in one sense, Augustine, this is a debate between Augustine, or intramural debate amongst realists about truth as correspondence between Augustine and Aquinas. So Augustine's idea is less problematic than Aquinas' definition of truth as adequation of thing and intellect. Aquinas' definition can be modified slightly to capture what Augustine was after, a close identification of truth with being. The modified Thomistic reading of Augustine would be: truth is had by someone, but exists independently of someone when someone's intellect is adequated with something. Okay, so I think that's an important point. Now, it is interesting to note that Aquinas thought that because truth is a relation between mind and reality, that even if there were no human minds, or before there were human minds, there was still the divine mind, and God's mind would always correspond to reality. But he says in one place in the Summa that per impossible, that is, since it's impossible for God not to exist. But if it were possible for God not to exist, if there were no divine mind, there would only be being. There would only be things that have being, but no minds to correspond to them. So there would be no truth in that sense. There would only be being. Okay, so now I'm not sure. It's hard for me to think about how Augustine might retroactively respond to that, but maybe there's an Augustinian response to it. But I think that might be a nice point of reference connection between Augustine and Aquinas. Okay, so now that was a brief survey of Christian medieval philosophy that starts with Jesus as the truth and moves into a further elaboration of what truth is, relying on Christian revelation as well as the hard work that was done by pagan philosophers like Socrates and Aristotle and Plato. Now, the notion of truth as correspondence is still dominant right through the Middle Ages. There are debates with metaphysics that you might think start to make realistic philosophy wobble a little bit in the Middle Ages, especially in regards to nominalism. But truth as correspondence is still holding strong, as it does in the modern philosophy. And I think we'll do a separate video on modern philosophy and truth in it. And so you can take a look at that. But thanks for watching.
Stay psyched, Grom. You!